The moment Roman DeLuca saw the curve of Lena's pregnant belly beneath her coat on that cold November street, his entire world stopped breathing. For 6 months, he had believed his ex-wife had destroyed their child, the lie that shattered him worse than any bullet ever could. Now the woman who vanished without a trace stood frozen before him, 7 months pregnant with the daughter he thought was dead. And in that single, devastating moment, the most feared mafia boss in the city realized the truth. She hadn't stopped loving him. She had run to save their baby from someone in his own empire who wanted them both dead. If you're ready to dive into a story of betrayal, protection, and a love dangerous enough to destroy empires, stay with me until the very end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The rain fell in sheets across the darkened streets of the city, turning the pavement into black mirrors that reflected nothing but shadows and secrets. Lena Vale moved quickly through the downpour, her coat pulled tight around her swollen belly, her breath coming in shallow bursts that had nothing to do with the cold. She had been so careful. 6 months of disappearing into the cracks of a world that didn't ask questions. 6 months of new names, cash-only transactions, and never staying in one place long enough to leave a footprint. 6 months of believing she had finally escaped Roman DeLuca. But the black SUV that had been trailing her for the last 3 blocks told a different story. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs as she ducked into the narrow alley between 2 crumbling brick buildings, her shoes splashing through puddles that soaked through to her skin. She pressed one hand protectively over her belly, feeling the flutter of movement beneath her palm, the only thing in this world that mattered anymore. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if she could sense her mother's fear. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "We're okay. We're going to be okay." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She had told so many lies in the past 6 months. Lies to the landlord who rented her the studio apartment under a fake name. Lies to the clinic where she received prenatal care without insurance. Lies to herself every time she woke up reaching for a man who had once been her entire world, before his world became too dangerous to survive. But the biggest lie of all was the one she had told Roman the day she walked out of his life forever. "I ended the pregnancy. Our baby is gone." Even now, the memory of his face in that moment could stop her breath, the way the color had drained from his skin, the way his hands had gone completely still at his sides, as if some vital part of him had just shut down. Roman DeLuca, the man who commanded fear with a single look, who built an empire on blood and ruthless precision, had looked at her with eyes so shattered she almost couldn't go through with it. Almost. But then she had remembered the voice on the phone 3 days earlier. Cold, clinical, absolutely certain. "If you want to keep breathing, you'll get rid of that baby and disappear. If you don't, I'll kill you both myself. And Roman will never even know it was me." Lena had recognized the voice, someone close to Roman, someone inside the family, someone with enough power to make her vanish without a trace and enough cruelty to enjoy doing it. So she had done the only thing she could do. She had lied to the man she loved, destroyed him with words designed to make him let her go, and vanished into a city that swallowed people whole every single day. For 6 months, it had worked. Until tonight. Lena reached the end of the alley and paused, pressing herself against the wet brick as she scanned the street beyond. Empty. Just the rain and the distant wail of sirens and the hollow echo of her own breathing. Maybe she had been paranoid. Maybe the SUV had just been... "Hello, Lena." The voice came from behind her, low and rough, and so achingly familiar that her entire body went rigid. She turned slowly, every muscle screaming at her to run, even though she knew there was nowhere left to go. And there he was, standing in the rain like some dark avenging angel, water streaming down the sharp planes of his face and soaking through the expensive black suit that fit him like armor. Roman DeLuca, her ex-husband, the father of her child, the most dangerous man she had ever loved. Roman. His name came out as barely a whisper, strangled by the fear and longing and desperate grief that tangled in her throat. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, rain pouring down around him, his dark eyes locked on her face with an intensity that made her skin burn despite the cold. Then his gaze dropped, slowly, deliberately, to the swell of her belly beneath the coat she clutched with white-knuckled hands. The world seemed to stop. Lena watched his expression change in real time. Confusion flickered first, his brows drawing together as if he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave, and with it came something she had never seen in Roman's eyes before. Raw, devastating heartbreak. "You're pregnant." His voice was barely recognizable, stripped of all the command and control that usually laced every word. "You're... how far along?" Lena's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there as the lies she had built her entire new life on crumbled to ash between them. Roman took a step forward and another until he was close enough that she could see the rain caught in his dark lashes, close enough that the scent of him, smoke and cedar and something indefinably Roman, wrapped around her like a ghost. His hand lifted, trembling slightly, reaching toward her belly as if he needed to touch it to believe it was real. "Don't." The word ripped out of her, sharp and panicked. "Don't touch me, don't." 7 months. His voice had gone completely hollow. "You're 7 months pregnant." It wasn't a question. Lena felt tears burning hot tracks down her cold cheeks, mixing with the rain. "Roman, please. You told me you ended the pregnancy." Each word fell like a stone between them. "You looked me in the eye and told me our baby was gone. That you couldn't." His voice broke on the last word, shattering into something so raw and wounded that Lena physically flinched. "I had to," she whispered. "I didn't have a choice." "You didn't have a choice?" The words exploded out of him, all that carefully controlled fury finally breaking free. "You lied to me about our child, Lena. You let me believe for 6 months that—" He stopped, his jaw working as he fought for control. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you have any fucking idea?" "Yes." The answer came out fierce and broken all at once. "Yes, I know exactly what it did to you because it destroyed me too. But I had to make you believe it. I had to make you let me go." "Why?" The question came out like a gunshot. "Why would you do that? Why would you run? Why would you—" "Because someone in your world threatened to kill us both if I didn't." The words hung in the rain-soaked air between them, terrible and irrevocable. Roman went absolutely still. Not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of a predator that has just locked onto prey. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something cold and lethal that made the hair rise on the back of Lena's neck. "What did you just say?" Lena wrapped both arms around her belly, as if she could physically shield her daughter from the truth that was about to come pouring out. 3 days before I left, I got a phone call. Someone who knew about the pregnancy. Someone who knew where I lived, where I went, everything. They told me if I didn't get rid of the baby and disappear, they would kill us both. And they said you would never know it was them. The muscle in Roman's jaw jumped. "Who?" "I don't know their name, but I recognized the voice. It was someone close to you, someone in the family." "Who?" Not a question anymore. A command laced with the kind of violence that had built empires and destroyed anyone foolish enough to stand in the way. "I don't know," Lena's voice cracked. "They didn't tell me who they were. They knew everything, Roman. They knew I was pregnant before I even told you. They knew about the appointment I had scheduled. They knew about the prenatal vitamins in my medicine cabinet. It was someone who had access to your inner circle. Someone you trusted." Roman's hands had curled into fists at his sides, and Lena could see the way his knuckles had gone white even in the dim light. For several long seconds, he didn't speak. He just stood there, breathing hard, rain streaming down his face as he processed what she had just told him. "You should have come to me." The words came out low and rough. "You should have told me someone threatened you." "And then what?" Lena shot back. "You would have locked me away somewhere safe while you tore your organization apart trying to find out who it was? And in the meantime, they would have gotten to me anyway because they were inside Roman. They were close enough to know things that only your most trusted people should know. So instead you decided to lie to me, to let me think you killed our baby, to disappear and leave me with nothing." The accusation hit like a physical blow, but Lena forced herself to hold his gaze. "I did what I had to do to keep our daughter alive, and I would do it again." "Our daughter." Roman repeated the words slowly, as if testing them. "We're having a daughter." Something shifted in his expression, something vulnerable and awed beneath all that rage and hurt. His gaze dropped to her belly again. And this time when his hand lifted, Lena didn't stop him. His palm settled gently over the curve where their daughter grew, warm and large and impossibly careful. For a moment, the rain in the city and the lies all seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them and the tiny life they had created together. Then the baby kicked, a strong thump directly against Roman's hand, and Lena watched something break open in his eyes. "She's real," he whispered. "She's really—" "Her name is going to be Isla," Lena said softly. "I was going to name her Isla Rose." Roman's thumb traced a slow circle over her belly, his expression caught somewhere between wonder and devastation. "Isla," he repeated, "our daughter." Then his gaze snapped back to Lena's face, and all that dangerous focus locked onto her like a weapon. "You're not running again, whatever threat you think is out there. Whatever ghost from my organization scared you into hiding, it ends now. You're coming with me." "Roman, no. You're not listening. You're 7 months pregnant with my child, Lena. My child. Do you really think I'm going to let you walk away again? Do you think there's anywhere in this city, anywhere in this world, that I won't find you?" "This is exactly what I was afraid of." Lena's voice rose, sharp with frustration. "You can't just decide what happens now. You can't just— Someone in my organization threatened to kill you and our daughter." Roman's voice cut through hers like a blade. "That person is going to die. But first, I'm going to make sure you're somewhere they can never touch you. So you have two choices, Lena. You can come with me willingly, or I can carry you. But either way, you're not spending another night alone." Lena stared at him, this man who had once been her everything, and felt the exhaustion of 6 months on the run crash over her all at once. She had been so tired, so scared, so desperately alone. And now here he was, offering protection with one hand and control with the other, and she didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "I need your word that you won't try to take Isla from me, that you won't decide I'm not fit to be her mother because I lied to you." Something dangerous flickered in Roman's eyes. "You think I would take our daughter from you? I think you're a man who's used to taking whatever he wants, and I think you're angry enough right now that you might convince yourself it's the right thing to do." For a long moment, Roman just looked at her. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body despite the cold rain. "I'm not going to take Isla from you," he said quietly. "But I'm also not going to let some coward in my organization destroy what's left of my family. So yes, Lena, you're coming with me. And you're going to tell me everything, every detail of that phone call, every word they said, every clue that might help me figure out who threatened you. And then I'm going to find them, and I'm going to end them." The promise in his voice was absolute, final. The kind of certainty that came from a man who had built an empire on keeping his word, no matter how dark that word might be. Lena closed her eyes, feeling the rain on her face and the weight of her daughter in her belly, and the terrible, inevitable pull toward the man she had loved enough to destroy herself trying to save. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Roman's safe house was exactly what Lena expected, remote, secure, and completely isolated from the rest of the world. They drove in silence through streets that gradually emptied of people and light until there was nothing but forest pressing in on either side of the road. The SUV's headlights cut through the darkness like twin knives, revealing glimpses of tall pines and the occasional flash of animal eyes before swallowing them back into shadow. Lena sat rigidly in the passenger seat, acutely aware of Roman's presence beside her. He hadn't said a word since they left the alley, but she could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. Anger and confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name, all twisted together into a silence that felt heavy enough to suffocate. "How long have you been living in that neighborhood?" The question came abruptly, breaking through the quiet. Lena kept her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window. 2 months. "And before that?" "Different places. I moved every few weeks." She heard Roman's sharp intake of breath but didn't look at him. Couldn't. If she looked at him now, she might see the hurt beneath the anger. And if she saw that, she might start explaining all the small, terrible ways she had survived the past 6 months. The cheap motels and the jobs that paid under the table, and the nights she had cried herself to sleep with one hand pressed over her belly, whispering apologies to the daughter who would never know her father. Except now that future had just imploded. You were alone. Roman's voice had gone dangerously soft. You were pregnant and alone, and moving every few weeks because you were afraid someone might find you. I was protecting Isla. By running scared through a city that eats people alive? By working yourself to exhaustion when you should have been resting? By... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. What were you doing for money? Waitressing, under the table. Waitressing. He repeated the word like it was a foreign language. You were on your feet for hours, 7 months pregnant, waitressing. I did what I had to do. What you had to do was come to me. Lena's hands curled into fists in her lap. And I've already explained why I couldn't do that. No. Roman's voice dropped to something cold and absolute. You explained why you were afraid. Fear is not the same as impossibility, Lena. You made a choice. You chose to lie to me, to disappear, to raise our daughter alone rather than trust that I could protect you. The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. You're right, Lena said quietly. I didn't trust you to protect me, because whoever threatened us was close enough to know things they shouldn't have known, and because I've seen what happens to people who get caught in the crossfire of your world, Roman. I've watched you bury friends. I've seen the security footage of attempts on your life. I know exactly how dangerous it is to be connected to you. And yet you married me anyway. Yes, I married you anyway, because I loved you enough to believe that love could somehow be stronger than all of that. She finally turned to look at him, meeting his eyes in the dim light from the dashboard. But when someone threatened to kill our baby, love wasn't enough anymore. Survival was all that mattered. Something flickered in Roman's expression. Grief, maybe, or recognition. And now? Now I don't know. The honesty felt like a confession. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I even know who you are anymore. I'm the man who spent 6 months trying to drink himself to death because I thought I'd lost both of you. The words came out raw and unguarded. I'm the man who burned half my organization to the ground, looking for answers that didn't exist because you were too good at disappearing. I'm the man who's standing in front of you now and trying very hard not to... He stopped abruptly, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Not to what? Lena pressed. Roman was quiet for so long she didn't think he would answer. Then, not to fall apart completely at the realization that everything I've done in the past 6 months, every decision, every move, every dark fucking corner I've crawled into trying to make sense of losing you, was based on a lie. The confession settled between them like a wound, and Lena felt something crack open in her chest. This was the Roman she had fallen in love with, the man beneath the reputation, the one who could be vulnerable and broken and somehow still standing. She had forgotten he existed, or maybe she had just stopped believing he could exist in the same world as the empire he ruled. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what it's worth, Roman. I'm sorry. He didn't respond. Just kept driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, until the forest gave way to a clearing and a house materialized out of the darkness like something from a dream. It was beautiful in a stark, functional way. All clean lines and dark wood and windows that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Security lights flickered on as they approached, bathing the property in harsh white light that revealed every corner, every angle, every possible approach. This is it? Lena asked. This is it. No one knows about this place except me. No one in the organization. No one in the family. Just me. Roman killed the engine and turned to face her fully. You'll be safe here. Until when? Until you find whoever threatened me? Until Isla is born? Until I decide you're safe, Roman interrupted. And that's not up for negotiation. Lena felt anger spike hot and sharp through her exhaustion. You can't just lock me away. Watch me. The words were soft but absolutely certain, and Lena recognized the futility of arguing. This was Roman in full control mode. The man who commanded an empire, who made decisions that destroyed lives or saved them with equal precision. She had seen this side of him before, during their marriage, and she had learned the hard way that when Roman DeLuca decided something was going to happen, it happened. Fine, she said tightly. But I want your word that you won't try to control me once we're inside, that you'll actually listen when I talk instead of just deciding what's best for everyone. Roman's expression was unreadable. I'll listen. But if what you're saying puts you or Isla at risk, I'm overruling it. Roman, those are the terms, Lena. Take them or don't. But either way, you're staying here tonight. They stared at each other in the dim interior of the SUV, the tension crackling between them like static electricity. Then Isla kicked, a sharp thump that Lena felt against her ribs, and she closed her eyes. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll stay. The inside of the safe house was as carefully controlled as everything else in Roman's world. Lena moved through rooms that were furnished with expensive simplicity. Leather furniture, dark wood surfaces, art on the walls that was probably worth more than she wanted to know. Everything was clean and cold and utterly devoid of anything personal. It felt exactly like Roman's office in the city. All power and control and carefully maintained distance. There are 3 bedrooms upstairs, Roman said from behind her. Take whichever one you want. The kitchen is fully stocked. Security system is active. If you need anything, I know how to reach you, Lena finished. She turned to face him, suddenly exhausted beyond words. Roman, I need to sleep. Can we talk about all of this tomorrow? For a moment she thought he might argue, but then something in his expression softened fractionally, and he nodded. Tomorrow. But first thing in the morning, you're telling me everything about that phone call. Every detail you can remember. Okay. And Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. Don't try to run again. There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you, and next time I won't be calm about it. The threat was clear, but underneath it, Lena heard something else, something that sounded almost like desperation. I won't run, she said quietly. Not tonight. It was the most honesty she could offer. Roman studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once and turned toward the stairs. Lena watched him go, this man who had once been her entire world, and felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her shoulders. She made her way upstairs slowly, her hand trailing along the smooth wood banister, and chose the bedroom farthest from the master suite. It was decorated in soft grays and whites, with a bed that looked like a cloud and windows that overlooked the dark forest beyond. Lena locked the door. A useless gesture, probably, given that Roman owned this place and likely had keys to every room, but it made her feel slightly more in control. Then she lowered herself onto the bed with a groan, one hand splayed protectively over her belly. Well, sweetheart, she whispered to Isla, I guess your daddy found us after all. The baby kicked in response, as if she understood exactly what that meant. Lena closed her eyes and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring, about the conversation they would have to have, about the traitor somewhere in Roman's organization who had threatened her life and driven her into hiding, about the fact that she was now completely dependent on a man she had spent 6 months running from. Most of all, she tried not to think about the look in Roman's eyes when his hand had settled over her belly in that rain-soaked alley. The wonder and heartbreak and desperate longing all twisted together into something so raw it had made her chest ache. She had told herself she was over him, that 6 months of absence had finally broken whatever spell he had cast over her heart. But standing there in the rain with his hand on her belly and their daughter kicking between them, Lena had felt the truth crash over her like a wave. She had never stopped loving Roman DeLuca. She had just learned to love their daughter more. The question now was whether that would be enough to survive whatever came next. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of having slept better than she had in months. For a single, blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot about the rain-soaked confrontation in the alley. Forgot about Roman's hand on her belly and the way his voice had cracked when he realized she had lied about their daughter. Then Isla kicked, sharp and insistent against her ribs, and reality came crashing back. She was in Roman's safe house, trapped, or protected, depending on how you looked at it, by the man she had spent 6 months running from. And today, she would have to tell him everything about the phone call that had driven her into hiding. Lena pushed herself upright with a groan, her back protesting the movement. 7 months pregnant meant that even the cloud-soft bed couldn't completely erase the constant ache in her spine. She made her way to the attached bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and tried to prepare herself for whatever was about to come. When she finally made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and something cooking, she found Roman in the kitchen. He stood at the stove with his back to her, dressed in dark jeans and a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders in a way that made her mouth go dry despite everything. His hair was slightly damp, as if he had just showered, and for a moment Lena could almost pretend this was normal, that they were still married, that the past 6 months had never happened. "You're awake," Roman said without turning around. "Sit down. I made breakfast." Lena hesitated in the doorway. "You cook now?" "I learned." He slid eggs and toast onto a plate with practiced efficiency and turned to face her. "When you left, I had to figure out how to do a lot of things I'd always let other people handle." The implication hung heavy between them, that her absence had forced him to become someone different, someone more self-sufficient, someone who cooked his own meals because the staff he employed couldn't be trusted not to poison him. Lena lowered herself carefully into one of the chairs at the sleek wooden table. "Thank you." Roman set the plate in front of her, then poured orange juice into a glass and placed it within reach. "Eat, then we talk." It wasn't a request. Lena picked up her fork and forced herself to take a bite, acutely aware of Roman watching her from across the kitchen. He had poured himself coffee, black, no sugar, the way he always drank it, and now he leaned against the counter with the mug cradled in both hands, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You look better," he said finally. "Less exhausted." "I slept well." Lena took another bite, surprised by how hungry she actually was. When had she last eaten a real meal? "The bed is comfortable." "Good." Roman's jaw tightened slightly. "When was the last time you had proper prenatal care?" The question hit like an accusation, and Lena felt her defenses rise. "I've been seeing a clinic. They take patients without insurance." "A clinic." Roman's voice had gone dangerously soft. "Not a doctor, a clinic." "I did what I could with what I had, Roman. Not all of us have unlimited resources." "You had resources." His knuckles went white around the coffee mug. "You had me. You had everything I could have given you. You chose to run instead. Because someone threatened to kill our daughter." Lena's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "How many times do I have to explain this before you understand? I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because staying meant watching someone murder Iela before she was even born." Roman set the mug down with deliberate care, then crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He braced both hands on the table, leaning down until his face was level with hers, close enough that she could see the shadows beneath his eyes and smell the coffee on his breath. "Then tell me everything," he said quietly. "Every word of that phone call. Every detail you remember. Because right now, someone in my organization is walking around thinking they got away with threatening my family, and I need to know who." Lena held his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was the Roman she remembered, the one who could shift from tender to terrifying in the space of a heartbeat, the one who had built an empire on knowing exactly when to use violence and when to use restraint. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." Roman straightened but didn't move away. He just stood there, waiting, his entire body coiled with controlled tension. Lena took a breath and forced herself to go back to that day. "It was 3 days before I left. I was at the apartment, our apartment, and the phone rang. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, but something made me pick up." "What time?" Roman's voice had gone clinical, detached. This was the strategist speaking now, the man who processed information like a weapon. "Early afternoon, maybe 1 o'clock. You were at a meeting downtown." "I remember. Continue." The voice on the other end was male, deep, calm. He said my name, my full name, Lena Marie Vale, and then he told me he knew I was pregnant. Lena's hands trembled slightly, and she pressed them flat against the table. "He said he knew I was 8 weeks along. He knew about the appointment I had scheduled with the OB/GYN for the following week. He even knew the doctor's name." Roman's expression darkened. That information was private. Exactly, which meant whoever was calling had access to things they shouldn't have, medical records, my schedule, everything. Lena swallowed hard. Then he said that if I wanted to keep breathing, I would terminate the pregnancy and disappear. And if I didn't, he would kill me and the baby himself. And you would never know it was him. Him! Roman latched onto the word immediately. You're sure it was a man? Yes, definitely male. The voice was too deep to be anything else. Age? Accent? Any identifying characteristics? Lena closed her eyes, trying to pull the memory into sharper focus. Older, I think. There was a roughness to the voice, like someone who'd been smoking for years. And there was something familiar about it. Not someone I knew well, but someone I had heard before. Maybe at one of your gatherings or meetings? Did he give you any sense of motive? Any reason why he wanted you gone? No. Just the threat. He said I had 48 hours to make my decision. Then he hung up. Roman was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities. And you didn't tell anyone. Who was I supposed to tell? Lena opened her eyes to find him watching her with something that looked almost like pain. You were at war with the Volkov family at the time. Every day there were new threats, new attacks. You barely slept. You were living on coffee and rage and the absolute certainty that you would crush anyone who challenged you. And I was supposed to walk up to you and say, hey, by the way, someone in your inner circle wants me dead? You would have locked me down so tight I couldn't breathe, and they still would have found a way to get to me. So you decided to lie instead. Roman's voice was flat. To tell me you had ended the pregnancy and then vanish. I decided to save our daughter's life. Lena pushed back from the table and stood, needing distance. You want to be angry at me for that? Fine. Be angry. But I won't apologize for doing what I had to do to keep Isla safe. And what about keeping yourself safe? The question came out sharp. What about the stress of being alone and pregnant and running scared? What about the fact that you could have gone into early labor or had complications and there would have been no one there to help you? I managed. You survived. Roman's hands clenched into fists at his sides. There's a difference, Lena. Surviving is not the same as being okay. The truth of it hit her harder than she expected, and suddenly Lena felt the exhaustion of the past 6 months crash over her all at once. You're right, she said quietly. I wasn't okay. I haven't been okay since the day I left, but at least Isla was alive. At least I could give her that much. Roman stared at her for a long moment, something complicated and unreadable flickering across his face. Then he turned away, bracing both hands on the counter and bowing his head. The Volkov War ended 4 months ago, he said finally. I crushed them, destroyed their operations, scattered their people, and made sure everyone in this city knew what happens when you come after what's mine. And the whole time, all I could think about was that you weren't there to see it, that I had won everything and lost the only things that mattered. Lena's throat tightened. Roman, I need you to understand something. He turned back to face her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her chest ache. When you told me you had ended the pregnancy, something inside me broke. I've done terrible things, Lena. I've hurt people. I've ordered deaths and watched empires burn. But nothing has ever come close to the way I felt in that moment. Like everything I had built suddenly meant nothing because I had failed to protect the one thing that actually mattered. You didn't fail, Lena whispered. I lied to you. I made you believe something that wasn't true because I thought it was the only way to keep Isla safe. And now she's still in danger. Roman's voice hardened. Because whoever made that threat is still out there. Still close enough to my organization to be a problem. And until I find them and end them, neither of you are safe. So what do? We start with the list. Roman moved to the table and pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Every person who had access to your medical information. Every person who was close enough to know your schedule. Every person who was in my inner circle 6 months ago. That's a lot of people, Roman. Then we narrow it down. He looked up at her, his expression absolutely certain. Voice characteristics, age, smoking habits. Anyone who matches the profile becomes a suspect, and I investigate them until I find the one who threatened you. Lena wrapped her arms around her belly, feeling Isla shift and settle beneath her hands. And when you find them, I eliminate the threat. Roman's voice was cold and final. Permanently. The certainty in his words should have frightened her, should have reminded her of all the reasons she had run in the first place. But instead, Lena felt something else entirely. A fierce, primal satisfaction at the idea of Roman destroying whoever had forced her into hiding. Okay, she said. Then let's make the list. They spent the next 2 hours going through names. Roman pulled up files on his phone and laptop, displaying photographs and dossiers on everyone who had been part of his organization 6 months ago. Lena studied each face, listened to voice recordings when they were available, and tried to match them against the memory of that phone call. But nothing clicked. Every voice was either too young, too unfamiliar, or lacked the rough quality she remembered. Every face blurred together until she couldn't be sure anymore if she would even recognize the person who had threatened her. "This isn't working," she said finally, rubbing her temples. I don't know if I would recognize him even if I heard the voice again." Roman closed his laptop with deliberate care. "Then we approach it differently. Who knew about your pregnancy before I did?" Lena frowned. "No one. I found out the morning before I told you, and I came straight to your office that afternoon." "You're sure you didn't tell anyone else? Not a friend, not your doctor?" "I hadn't even seen a doctor yet. I took a home pregnancy test, and then I told you." Lena's stomach twisted as realization dawned. But the person on the phone said I was 8 weeks along. They knew the exact time frame. Which means they either had access to your medical records after you saw the doctor, or... Roman trailed off, his expression darkening. "Or they were watching me," Lena finished. "Close enough to know when I took the test. Close enough to know when I scheduled the first appointment." "Someone in your security detail." Roman's voice had gone dangerously soft. "Someone I assigned to keep you safe." The implications crashed over them both like a wave. If someone on Lena's security team had been the one to threaten her, that meant the betrayal went deeper than either of them had realized. It meant someone Roman had trusted with his wife's life had been the very person trying to end it. "Who was on my details 6 months ago?" Lena asked quietly. Roman was already pulling up the information. Marcus Chen, Tony Delgado, Vincent Russo, and... He stopped, his jaw clenching. "And my cousin, David DeLuca." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "David? He was supposed to be temporary, just filling in while Marcus was recovering from surgery." Roman's knuckles went white around the phone. "I put him on your detail myself." "Roman, you can't seriously think David would... I don't know what to think anymore." Roman set the phone down with forced calm. 6 months ago, I would have trusted David with my life. He's family. He's been part of the organization since we were teenagers. But family doesn't mean anything if someone has a reason to betray you. What reason would David have? Roman was quiet for a moment, his expression shuddered. Then, ambition. He's always wanted more power within the organization, more control, and he's never made it a secret that he thought my marriage to you was a weakness, that loving you made me vulnerable. The words hit like a physical blow. He said that to you? Not in those exact words, but the sentiment was clear. Roman's gaze found hers, dark and troubled. If David believed that getting rid of you would strengthen my position or give him an opportunity to move up, he might have convinced himself it was the right thing to do. Lena sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. She had met David DeLuca dozens of times during her marriage to Roman, had shared meals with him, had listened to him tell stories about Roman's childhood, had seen the way he looked at his cousin with something that seemed like genuine affection. But she had also seen the flash of resentment in his eyes whenever Roman made a decision David disagreed with, had heard the edge in his voice when he talked about the old ways of running the organization versus Roman's more strategic approach, had noticed the way he watched Roman's rise to power with something that looked almost like envy. "The voice," Lena said suddenly. "David smokes. I've seen him with cigars at your gatherings." Roman's expression went absolutely still. "You're sure?" "Yes, he always has those expensive Cuban ones. He offered me one once before I was pregnant, and I turned him down." Lena pressed both hands against her belly, feeling sick. "Roman, if it was David, if your own cousin threatened to kill me in Isla, then he's already dead." Roman's voice was cold and final. "He just doesn't know it yet. You can't just kill him based on suspicion. What if we're wrong? Then I'll find out the truth first." Roman stood, already moving toward the door. "But if David made that phone call, if he threatened my family and forced you into hiding, then there's no place on this earth he can run that I won't find him." "Roman, wait!" Lena pushed herself to her feet, panic rising in her chest. Where are you going? To have a conversation with my cousin. Roman pulled car keys from his pocket, his movements sharp and controlled. You're staying here. The security system is armed. Don't open the door for anyone but me. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. This is about me. Lena crossed the space between them, getting close enough to grab his arm. Someone threatened me and our daughter. I have a right to face them. Roman looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up to her face. You're 7 months pregnant, Lena. I'm not taking you anywhere near a confrontation that could turn violent. And I'm not sitting here alone while you go interrogate someone who might have tried to kill me. Lena held his gaze, refusing to back down. I need to see his face, Roman. I need to know if it was really him. For a long moment, they stared at each other, wills clashing in the charged space between them. Then Roman's expression shifted, something almost like pride flickering across his face. You've gotten stronger, he said quietly. 6 months ago, you would have let me handle this alone. 6 months ago, I still believed you could protect me from everything. Lena released his arm and stepped back. Now I know better. Now I know that sometimes the only person who can protect me is myself. Roman's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. You come with me. But you stay in the car, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Those are the terms. Agreed. And Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. If it was David, if he's the one who did this, you don't intervene. You let me handle it my way. The promise of violence in his voice was absolute, and Lena felt a chill run down her spine. But she also felt something else, a fierce, dark satisfaction at the idea of justice being served. Okay, she said quietly. I won't interfere. The drive into the city felt like descending into another world. The peaceful isolation of the safe house gave way to traffic and noise and the constant pulse of life that defined the urban sprawl. Roman drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression locked in that dangerous calm that meant his mind was working through a dozen different scenarios at once. Lena watched the city blur past the windows and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. If David really had been the one to threaten her, if he had forced her into hiding and made her lie to Roman about their daughter, then what happened next would be brutal and final. Roman didn't forgive betrayal, especially not from family. Where are we meeting him? She asked finally. One of the old warehouses near the docks, neutral territory. Roman's voice was clipped. I told him I needed to discuss some organizational business. He doesn't know you're back. And when he sees me? Then we'll have our answer. Roman glanced at her briefly. If he looks surprised, genuinely shocked to see you alive, then he wasn't involved. But if there's even a flicker of recognition, even a moment where he realizes his threat didn't work, you'll know, Lena finished. I'll know. They pulled up to the warehouse 20 minutes later. It was exactly the kind of place Lena had learned to associate with Roman's world. Abandoned on the surface, but clearly maintained with security cameras hidden in shadows, and the kind of stillness that came from places where dangerous men conducted dangerous business. Roman parked the SUV in a position that gave them a clear view of the entrance but kept them partially hidden behind a stack of shipping containers. Then he turned to face Lena fully. Last chance to stay behind, he said. Lena shook her head. I need to see him. Then stay in the car, no matter what happens. Understood? Understood. Roman studied her face for a moment longer, then leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead, quick and fierce and completely unexpected. If anything goes wrong, you drive away. You don't look back. You go straight to the safe house and you lock every door. Before Lena could respond, he was out of the car and moving toward the warehouse with the kind of predatory grace that made him so dangerous. She watched him disappear inside, her heart hammering against her ribs, one hand pressed protectively over her belly. Minutes ticked by like hours. Lena counted her own heartbeats, trying to stay calm, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Then movement at the warehouse entrance caught her attention, and she saw a figure emerging from a black sedan that had just pulled up. David DeLuca. Even from a distance, Lena recognized him. Tall and lean with the same dark coloring as Roman, but without the raw intensity that made Roman so magnetic. David moved with confidence, clearly expecting a routine business meeting, completely unaware of what was waiting for him inside. Lena watched him disappear through the warehouse door, and then there was nothing to do but wait. She had no idea what was happening inside that building. No way to hear the conversation or see Roman's face as he confronted his cousin. All she could do was sit in the suffocating silence and pray that they had been wrong, that David wasn't the one who had threatened her, that there was some other explanation that would make all of this make sense. Then the screaming started. It was muffled by distance and concrete walls, but unmistakable. A man's voice, raw with pain and terror, begging for something Lena couldn't quite make out. She felt ice flood her veins, her entire body going rigid with shock. The screaming cut off abruptly, replaced by silence so complete it was almost worse. Lena's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, every instinct screaming at her to run, to drive away just like Roman had told her to. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only sit there and wait for whatever was about to emerge from that warehouse. When Roman finally appeared in the doorway, he was alone. Blood splattered his shirt and hands, dark and damning in the afternoon light. He moved toward the SUV with the same controlled grace as before, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just done something terrible inside that building. He slid into the driver's seat without a word, started the engine, and pulled away from the warehouse with careful precision. Lena stared at him, her throat too tight to speak. "It was him," Roman said finally, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "David made the phone call. He threatened you, and he's been working with a faction inside the organization that wants me removed from power." "Is he—" Lena couldn't finish the question. "He's alive. For now." Roman's hands tightened on the wheel. "But he won't be for long, not after what he confessed to." "What did he confess?" Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That he planned to kill you 6 months ago. That when you disappeared, he thought you had followed through on the abortion and run because you were scared. He had no idea you were still pregnant. No idea Isla existed." His voice dropped to something dark and terrible. "Until I showed him the ultrasound photos from your file." Lena felt bile rise in her throat. "Roman, what did you do?" "What I had to do." He glanced at her briefly, and for just a moment, she saw past the cold mask to the man beneath, the one who was barely holding himself together. "He threatened my family, Lena. He put you through 6 months of hell. He made you believe you had to destroy our daughter to survive. There's no version of this where he walks away." The certainty in his words should have terrified her, should have reminded her of every reason she had run from this world in the first place. But instead, Lena felt something else entirely. A bone-deep relief that the person who had threatened her was finally going to pay for what they had done. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They drove in silence back to the safe house, the weight of violence and revelation settling between them like a living thing. And as the city gave way to forest and the warehouse disappeared behind them, Lena realized that everything had changed. She wasn't running anymore. And Roman wasn't letting her go. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The blood on Roman's shirt had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time they returned to the safe house. Lena watched him strip it off in the middle of the kitchen and drop it into the trash without ceremony, revealing the lean muscle and old scars that mapped a life of violence across his skin. He moved to the sink and scrubbed his hands with methodical precision, the water running pink and then clear, as if he could wash away what he had done with soap and cold water. Lena stood in the doorway, one hand pressed to her belly, where Isla had been kicking restlessly for the past 20 minutes, as if their daughter could sense the tension radiating through her mother's body. "Say something," Roman said finally, his back still to her. "Tell me I'm a monster. Tell me you're terrified. Tell me something." "I'm not terrified of you." The truth came out quiet but certain. "I'm terrified of what happens next." Roman turned to face her, water still dripping from his hands. "What happens next is that I dismantle the faction David was working with. Every person who signed onto his plan to remove me from power. Every person who knew about the threat against you and said nothing. I tear them out of my organization root and branch until there's nothing left but loyalty." "And how many people will die for that?" Lena asked. "However many it takes." No hesitation, no doubt. Just cold, absolute certainty. "You think I won't burn my entire empire to the ground if that's what it takes to keep you and Isla safe? You think there's a line I won't cross?" "I know there isn't." Lena moved further into the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the cold tile. That's what scares me, Roman. Not that you'll go too far, but that there is no too far for you anymore. That you'll destroy everything and everyone around you and call it protection. Roman's jaw tightened. You would rather I let them live? Let them walk away knowing they tried to kill my family? I would rather you think about what kind of world we're bringing Isla into. Lena's voice cracked slightly. What kind of father you want to be to her? Because right now, you're so focused on revenge that you can't see past the next throat you need to cut. The words landed like a slap, and Lena watched Roman's expression shift from cold fury to something raw and wounded. He gripped the edge of the sink behind him, knuckles going white, and for a moment she thought he might explode, might unleash all that carefully controlled violence in her direction. Instead, he closed his eyes and took a breath so deep it made his shoulders shake. I don't know how to be anything else, he said finally, his voice stripped bare. This is what I am, Lena. This is what I've always been. A man who solves problems with violence because it's the only language I've ever really understood. You knew that when you married me. You knew what you were getting into. I knew you were dangerous, Lena agreed. I knew you had blood on your hands and enemies who wanted you dead. But I also knew the man who brought me coffee in bed every morning, who read to me at night when I couldn't sleep, who looked at me like I was the only thing in his world that mattered more than power. She moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. Where is that man, Roman? Because right now all I see is the mafia boss, and I need to know if there's anything left of the husband I fell in love with. Roman's eyes snapped open, dark and turbulent. That man died the day you told me you had killed our baby. He died thinking he had failed to protect the only things that ever mattered. And when he came back, when he found out you were alive and pregnant and had been running scared for 6 months, he came back harder, colder. Because soft doesn't keep you safe in my world, Lena. Mercy doesn't protect the people you love. Neither does becoming the thing everyone fears most. Lena reached out and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. You want to protect us? Then don't become so consumed by revenge that there's nothing left for Isla to know but violence. Don't turn yourself into the kind of father who teaches his daughter that love and brutality are the same thing. Roman's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it harder against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, fast and unsteady beneath her palm. I don't know if I can be what you need me to be. I don't know if I can stop being what I am. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are. Lena's voice gentled. I'm asking you to remember that you're more than just the empire you built. That you're about to be a father, and that Isla is going to need you to be more than just a man who knows how to destroy his enemies. For a long moment, Roman just stared at her. Then slowly, carefully, he lifted his other hand and cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a tenderness that felt like a contradiction to everything he had just done. I would give up everything for you, he said quietly. The empire. The power. Every blood-soaked dollar I've ever earned. If it meant keeping you and Isla safe, I would walk away from all of it tomorrow and never look back. The confession hit Lena like a punch to the chest. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Roman's gaze held hers, raw and unguarded. The only reason I haven't already burned it all down is because right now my enemies are still circling. Right now, walking away would make you vulnerable. But once I've eliminated every threat, once I know for certain that no one will ever touch you again, I'm done. I'm out. And I'll build something new, something that doesn't require me to be a monster. Lena felt tears burning hot behind her eyes. Roman, I mean it, Lena. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Isla. I'm choosing the family we could have if you'll let me prove I can be worthy of it. Before Lena could respond, before she could process the enormity of what he had just offered, Isla kicked hard enough to make her gasp. Roman's hand dropped immediately to her belly, his expression transforming from fierce intensity to wonder in the space of a heartbeat. She's strong, he murmured, his palm spreading wide over the curve where their daughter grew. She takes after her father. Lena covered his hand with hers. Stubborn, determined, completely uncompromising when she wants something. Roman's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. And her mother? What does she take from you? Hopefully the sense to know when to run from danger instead of confronting it head on. This time Roman did smile, small and sad and achingly familiar. You ran. And I still found you, which means Isla is going to be absolutely impossible to handle. We're going to be in so much trouble, Lena agreed, and despite everything, despite the blood and the violence and the fear that still lived in her bones, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the memory of what hope used to feel like. The moment shattered when Roman's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with a frown, his expression going cold and focused as he read the message on the screen. Whatever softness had been in his eyes vanished, replaced by the calculating intensity of the strategist. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Marcus." Roman's jaw tightened. "My head of security. He's found evidence that the faction working with David is larger than we thought, and they're planning to move against me within the week." Ice flooded Lena's veins. "Move against you how?" "An ambush. They're going to try to take me out during the meeting I have scheduled with the Eastern Territory bosses on Friday." Roman was already moving, grabbing his laptop from the counter and pulling up files. "They think if they can eliminate me and make it look like a power grab from outside the organization, they can step into the vacuum and restructure everything under their control." "Can they?" Lena hated how small her voice sounded. "Can they actually kill you?" Roman glanced up at her, and something in his expression softened fractionally. "Not if I see them coming. And now that I know what David told me, now that I have names and connections, they've already lost. They just don't know it yet." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let them think their plan is working." Roman's smile was sharp and cold. "I'm going to walk into that meeting exactly like they expect, and then I'm going to kill every single one of them." The casual certainty in his voice made Lena's stomach turn. "That's suicide, Roman. If there are as many of them as you think, then I'll have Marcus position my most loyal men around the perimeter. I'll wear body armor. I'll be prepared." He moved toward her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "But I can't let them think I'm afraid. I can't let them believe they've backed me into a corner, because the moment that they think they have power over me is the moment this whole thing spirals out of control." "Or you could not go at all." Lena gripped his wrists, desperate. "You could stay here, keep us safe. Let Marcus handle the fallout." "And look weak? Let them think threatening my family works?" Roman shook his head. "No, this ends on Friday, one way or another." "You're talking about a war, Roman. I'm talking about survival." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Mine, yours, Isla's. And if I have to start a war to ensure that survival, then that's exactly what I'll do." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another way, a solution that didn't involve walking into an ambush and betting his life on being faster and more brutal than the people trying to kill him. But she knew that look in his eyes, knew the set of his jaw. This was Roman DeLuca in full command mode, and nothing she said would change his mind. "Promise me something," she said instead, her voice shaking. "Promise me that if it goes wrong, if you can't win, you run. You don't die for your pride. You come back to us." Roman's expression cracked, just for a moment, revealing the fear beneath the certainty. "I promise," he said quietly. "I'll come back to you, both of you." Then he kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything they couldn't say out loud. And Lena kissed him back, pouring 6 months of grief and fear and impossible love into the press of her mouth against his, her hands fisted in his hair as if she could physically hold him to that promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman pressed his forehead to hers. "I need you to stay here. No arguments, no negotiations. You stay in this house with the security system armed until I come back for you." "Okay," Lena whispered, because what else could she say? "Okay?" The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended tension. Roman was gone more than he was present, coordinating with Marcus and his most trusted lieutenants, preparing for the confrontation that was coming. When he was at the safe house, he was different, quieter, more focused, but also more present in a way he hadn't been before. He asked about Isla constantly, his hand finding Lena's belly with an almost compulsive need to feel their daughter move. He made sure Lena ate properly, rested enough, took her prenatal vitamins with an intensity that would have been smothering if it hadn't been so clearly rooted in fear. On Thursday night, the night before the meeting, Roman didn't leave. He stayed at the safe house and cooked dinner, pasta with a red sauce that filled the kitchen with the scent of garlic and tomatoes, and they ate together in silence that felt heavy with everything unsaid. After dinner, Roman guided Lena to the living room and settled her on the couch, with pillows arranged carefully behind her back. Then he surprised her by kneeling on the floor in front of her, his hands resting on her knees. "Can I talk to her?" he asked quietly. "To Isla?" Lena's throat tightened. "Of course." Roman shifted closer, his hands sliding to frame her belly with a reverence that made her chest ache. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to the curve where their daughter was growing, and spoke in a voice so soft Lena almost couldn't hear it. "Hey, baby girl. It's your dad. I know you can't understand me yet, but I need to tell you something anyway." He paused, his breath warm against Lena's skin. "I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'm going to make sure your mom is safe. And I'm going to come back tomorrow and be here to meet you when you're ready to join the world. That's a promise, Isla. Your dad doesn't break his promises." Isla kicked, strong and immediate, right against Roman's palm. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob, his fingers spreading wider as if he could hold all of her at once. "She hears you," Lena whispered, running her fingers through his dark hair. "She knows your voice." Roman looked up at her, his eyes bright with something that looked dangerously close to tears. "I need you to know that if something goes wrong tomorrow, if I don't make it back, Marcus has instructions. He'll get you out of the country, set you up somewhere safe with enough money to take care of Hila for the rest of her life. You won't have to be afraid anymore." "Don't." Lena's voice cracked. "Don't talk like you're already dead." "I'm not." Roman rose to his knees, bringing himself level with her. "But I need to know you'll be okay if the worst happens. I need to know Isla will grow up safe and loved and protected, even if I'm not there to do it myself." Tears spilled hot down Lena's cheeks. "You promised you'd come back." "And I will." He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "But just in case something goes wrong, I need you to know that loving you was the best thing I ever did, that the past 6 months without you were the worst of my life, and that if I could go back and do everything differently, the only thing I would change is that I would have found a way to keep you safe from the start." "Roman." He kissed her before she could finish, soft and achingly tender, and Lena felt her heart break open all over again. When he finally pulled back, his expression had shifted into something fierce and determined. "I'm coming back," he said. "Tomorrow night, I'm walking through that door. And then we're going to figure out what the rest of our lives look like. Together." Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They stayed like that for a long time, Roman's hands on her belly and Lena's fingers in his hair, while Isla kicked and turned between them like a promise neither of them could afford to break. When Friday morning came, Roman was already awake when Lena opened her eyes. She found him sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in a dark suit that looked expensive and lethal all at once, a bulletproof vest visible beneath the jacket. He was strapping a gun to his ankle with practiced efficiency, his movements controlled and methodical. "You're really doing this," Lena said quietly. Roman looked over his shoulder at her. "I have to." "I know." She pushed herself upright, her hand automatically going to her belly. "Just be careful, please." He crossed to her side of the bed and leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I will, and I'll be back before you know it." "Roman?" Lena caught his hand before he could pull away. "I love you. I never stopped loving you. Not even when I was running. Not even when I thought I'd never see you again." Something shattered in Roman's expression, all that careful control cracking to reveal the man beneath. "I love you too," he said roughly. "I love you and Isla more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And that's why I have to do this. That's why I have to end this threat once and for all." Then he was gone, moving through the house with quiet purpose until she heard the front door open and close, heard the SUV's engine roar to life and fade into the distance. Lena sat alone in the empty bedroom, one hand pressed to her belly, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena tried to distract herself. She read, she paced, she talked to Isla in soft whispers about everything and nothing. But no matter what she did, her mind kept circling back to Roman walking into that meeting, surrounded by people who wanted him dead. By late afternoon, the fear had crystallized into something sharp and unbearable. Lena was standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the darkening forest, when the first cramp hit. It started low in her abdomen, a tightening sensation that made her breath catch. Not painful, exactly, but wrong. Different from the usual aches and discomforts of pregnancy. Lena pressed her hand to her belly and waited for it to pass, but instead of fading, the sensation intensified. Another cramp rolled through her, stronger this time, and Lena felt something cold and terrifying curl in her chest. This wasn't normal. She made it to the couch before the third cramp hit, this one sharp enough to make her cry out. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed Roman's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. He was in the middle of a meeting that could determine whether he lived or died. He wouldn't have his phone on. Lena tried Marcus next, her fingers clumsy on the screen. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. DeLuca?" His voice was cautious, professional. "Is everything all right?" "Something's wrong." Lena's voice came out thin and frightened. "I'm having contractions. It's too early. I'm only 7 months, but something's definitely wrong." She heard Marcus swear viciously on the other end of the line. "I'm sending someone to the safe house now. Don't move. Don't do anything. Just stay calm." And another contraction cut through her, strong enough that Lena doubled over with a gasp. "Marcus, I can't. I need to get to a hospital." "I need 20 minutes," Marcus interrupted. "I'll have someone there in 20 minutes. Can you hold on until then?" Lena pressed her free hand hard against her belly, feeling Isla moving frantically inside her. "I don't know, I don't—" The line crackled with static, and then Marcus was shouting something she couldn't quite make out. In the background, she heard gunfire, sharp staccato bursts that made her blood run cold. "Marcus?" Lena's voice rose. "Marcus, what's happening?" But the line had already gone dead. Lena stared at the phone in her trembling hand, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. Gunfire. At Roman's meeting. Which meant the ambush had started. Which meant Roman was in the middle of a firefight right now, fighting for his life, while she sat here alone and going into premature labor. Another contraction seized her, and this time Lena felt something give way inside her. She looked down and saw wetness spreading across the couch beneath her, and her heart stopped. Her water had broken. Isla was coming, 2 months too early, in the middle of a safe house with no medical help and no way to reach the hospital. And Roman might already be dead. The thought sent panic crashing through her so violently that Lena couldn't breathe. She fumbled for her phone again, trying Marcus, trying Roman, trying anyone who might be able to help. But every call went to voicemail or silence, and the contractions were getting stronger, closer together, until all she could do was curl into herself and try not to scream. She didn't know how long she stayed like that, minutes or hours, time losing all meaning in the haze of pain and terror. But eventually she heard a car outside, heard footsteps pounding up to the front door, heard someone shouting her name. The door burst open and Marcus appeared, blood splattered across his shirt and a wild desperation in his eyes. "Lena!" "The baby," Lena gasped. "She's coming. It's too early, but she's—" "I know." Marcus was already pulling out his phone, already barking orders at someone on the other end. "We're getting you to a hospital, right now. Can you walk?" "I don't know, Another contraction ripped through her and Lena cried out, her entire body going rigid. Marcus didn't wait for her to finish. He simply scooped her into his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her toward the door. "Helicopter's landing in 2 minutes. We'll have you at the hospital in 15. Just hold on, okay? Just hold on." "Roman," Lena managed through the pain. "Where's Roman? Is he—" "He's alive." Marcus's voice was tight. "He took 3 bullets, but he's alive and he's en route to the same hospital. You'll see him when we get there." 3 bullets. The words echoed in Lena's mind as Marcus carried her into the night, as the helicopter blades whirred to life somewhere close by, as pain and fear and desperate hope all tangled together into something too big to contain. Roman was alive, but he'd been shot, and she was going into labor 2 months early, and their daughter, their tiny, fierce, impossibly loved daughter, was fighting her way into a world that had already proven itself too dangerous for the people Lena cared about most. As Marcus lifted her into the helicopter and the world tilted and spun around her, Lena pressed both hands to her belly and made a promise to the daughter she was about to meet. "We're going to survive this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the blades. "All 3 of us. We're going to survive." And somewhere in the darkness, fighting his own battle against death, Roman DeLuca was making the exact same promise. The hospital lights were too bright, the antiseptic smell too sharp, the sounds of machines beeping and voices calling out too loud. Lena registered all of it through a haze of pain that seemed to consume her entire world. Marcus had carried her through the emergency entrance shouting for help, and within seconds she had been surrounded by doctors and nurses asking questions she barely had the breath to answer. "How far along are you?" 7 months. "When did the contractions start?" "I don't know. An hour ago? Maybe 2? Any bleeding before your water broke?" "No, I don't think so. I can't." Another contraction ripped through her and Lena cried out, her hands clutching at the gurney rails as they wheeled her down a corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. Faces blurred above her, concerned, professional, moving with practiced efficiency, but none of them were the face she needed to see. "Roman," she gasped. "Where's Roman? Marcus said he was shot. I need to—" "Ma'am, we need you to focus on your breathing right now." A young doctor with kind eyes leaned into her line of sight. "Your baby is coming early, and we need to make sure she's stable. Can you do that for me? Can you breathe through the contractions?" Lena wanted to scream that she didn't care about breathing, that she needed to know if Roman was alive or dying somewhere in this same building. But Isla kicked weakly inside her, and the maternal instinct that had driven every decision for the past 6 months took over. She nodded and tried to focus on the breathing exercises she had learned from online videos during those long, lonely months of hiding. They rushed her into a delivery room and transferred her to a bed. And suddenly there were monitors being strapped to her belly and an IV being inserted into her arm and voices discussing things like fetal distress and premature labor protocols. Lena caught fragments of conversation through the fog of pain. "Heart rate is dropping. We need to prep for an emergency C-section. Get the NICU team down here now." Emergency C-section. The words penetrated through Lena's panic, and she grabbed the wrist of the nearest nurse. "Wait, what's wrong? What's happening to my baby?" The nurse, a middle-aged woman with steel gray hair and steady hands, squeezed Lena's hand. "Your daughter is showing signs of distress. Her heart rate keeps dropping during contractions. We're going to need to deliver her surgically to make sure she's safe. Do you understand?" "But she's too early. She's only 7 months. What if—" "We have an excellent NICU here," the nurse interrupted gently. "We deliver premature babies all the time. Your daughter is going to get the best care possible. But right now, we need your consent for the surgery." Lena's mind raced. She was alone. Roman was somewhere in this hospital with 3 bullet wounds. She was about to have major surgery and deliver a daughter who was 2 months too early to be safe. Everything was spiraling out of control, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, do it." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. They were prepping her for surgery, explaining what would happen, asking questions about allergies and medical history that Lena answered on autopilot. Then an anesthesiologist appeared and was talking about an epidural, and Lena had to curl onto her side despite the contractions while they inserted a needle into her spine. "You're going to feel pressure, but you shouldn't feel pain," the anesthesiologist explained. "The numbness will spread quickly. Just try to stay still." Lena focused on breathing, on staying calm for Isla's sake, on not thinking about Roman bleeding out in some operating room. The numbness crept through her lower body like a wave, dulling the contractions into distant pressure. They laid her back and began draping surgical sheets, creating a barrier so she couldn't see what they were about to do. "Is there anyone we can call for you?" the gray-haired nurse asked, appearing at Lena's shoulder. "Family? A friend?" "My husband is here. Somewhere. He was shot." Lena's voice cracked. "His name is Roman DeLuca. Can you find out if he's okay? Please?" The nurse's expression shifted, recognition flickering across her features at the name. Everyone in this city knew who Roman DeLuca was, but to her credit, she simply nodded. "I'll see what I can find out." Then the doctor was there, positioned between Lena's legs, and everything became terrifyingly real. "We're starting now," he said calmly. "You're going to feel some pressure and tugging, but remember, no pain. If you feel pain, you tell us immediately." Lena nodded, her hands gripping the rails so hard her knuckles went white. She could feel them working, could sense the strange pulling sensation of her body being opened, But true to the anesthesiologist's word, there was no pain, just pressure and the overwhelming terror of knowing they were cutting her daughter out of her 2 months too soon. "Almost there," the doctor murmured. "Just a little more." Then suddenly there was a release of pressure, a sensation of something being lifted away, and the room went absolutely silent. Lena's heart stopped. Why isn't she crying? Why can't I hear her? "Give us a second," someone said, but Lena could hear the concern beneath the calm. She tried to lift her head, tried to see what was happening, but the surgical drape blocked her view. All she could hear was the sound of people moving quickly, urgently, and the terrible absence of a baby's cry. "Come on, sweetheart," a voice murmured. "Come on." And then, finally, beautifully, Lena heard it. A thin, reedy wail that was the most perfect sound she had ever heard in her life. "There she is," the doctor said, and Lena could hear the smile in his voice. "There's our fighter." Tears streamed down Lena's face as they brought Isla around the drape for just a moment. A tiny, impossibly small creature with red skin and dark hair plastered to her head, crying with an indignation that made Lena's chest ache with love so fierce it was almost painful. "She's beautiful," Lena sobbed. "Is she okay? Is she—" "She's breathing on her own, which is excellent for 30 weeks, the doctor said. "But we need to get her to the NICU right away. They'll run tests, make sure her lungs are developed enough, monitor her for any complications. You'll be able to see her as soon as we finish here." They whisked Isla away before Lena could say anything else, and suddenly she was alone again with just the surgical team working to close the incision they had made. The gray-haired nurse reappeared, and Lena latched onto her presence like a lifeline. "My baby is in the best hands possible," the nurse assured her. "The NICU team here is top-notch. They'll take good care of her." "And Roman? Did you find out about Roman?" The nurse hesitated, and in that pause, Lena felt her heart drop into her stomach. "He's in surgery. He was shot 3 times, shoulder, side, and leg. He lost a lot of blood. But he's alive, and the surgeons are working on him now." Alive. Roman was alive. Lena closed her eyes and let the relief wash over her, even as fear still clawed at her throat. 3 gunshot wounds. Surgery. He could still die on that operating table. She could still lose him. "I need to see him," Lena said desperately. "As soon as they're done here, I need to—" "You need to rest and recover," the nurse interrupted firmly, but not unkindly. "You just had major surgery, and your body needs time to heal. Once you're stable and your daughter is settled in the NICU, we'll see about getting you to your husband. But right now you focus on yourself, okay?" It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. But Lena was too exhausted and overwhelmed to argue. She just nodded and let them finish their work, feeling the strange tugging sensations as they closed her up, layer by layer. They moved her to a recovery room afterward, a quiet space with dimmed lights and soft beeping from the monitors tracking her vitals. A different nurse came in to check on her, adjusting the IV and asking questions about pain levels and nausea. Lena answered mechanically, her mind somewhere else entirely. Isla was in the NICU. Roman was in surgery, and she was stuck in this bed, unable to go to either of them. "When can I see my daughter?" Lena asked for what felt like the 100th time. "Soon," the nurse promised. "They're getting her stabilized. Once the doctors clear it, we'll wheel you down there." "And my husband?" "Still in surgery. I'll let you know the moment I hear anything." Time crawled. Lena drifted in and out of a restless sleep, jerking awake every time she heard footsteps in the hallway or voices near her door. At some point, they brought her ice chips to suck on since she couldn't have water yet, and the cold helped ground her slightly in the present moment. Finally, after what felt like hours but might have been less, a doctor in surgical scrubs appeared in her doorway. He looked exhausted but not grief-stricken, which Lena took as a good sign. "Mrs. DeLuca, I'm Dr. Morrison. I operated on your husband." Lena pushed herself more upright despite the pulling sensation in her abdomen. "Is he alive?" "He's alive," Dr. Morrison confirmed, and Lena felt something unlock in her chest. "The surgery went well. We removed all 3 bullets and repaired the damage. The one to his shoulder nicked an artery, which is why he lost so much blood, but we were able to get it under control. He's in recovery now, still sedated, but his vitals are stable." "When can I see him?" He'll be moved to the ICU within the hour. Once you're cleared to move, we can take you up there." Dr. Morrison's expression softened slightly. He's going to have a long recovery ahead of him. The leg wound in particular is going to require physical therapy, but he's strong and he fought like hell to stay alive. I think that has something to do with wanting to meet his daughter. Lena's throat tightened. "You told him? About Isla?" "He was conscious for a few minutes before we put him under. He asked about you, about the baby. We told him you both made it through." The doctor paused. He cried. "I've been a trauma surgeon for 20 years and I've never seen a man look more relieved." The image of Roman, brutal, controlled Roman, crying with relief over their survival broke something open in Lena's chest. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you for saving him." Dr. Morrison nodded. "Get some rest, Mrs. DeLuca. You've both been through hell today." After he left, Lena lay back against the pillows and let the tears come. They streamed down her face in hot, silent tracks, tears of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming love for the two people fighting for their lives in different parts of this hospital. Another hour passed before they finally wheeled her down to the NICU. The nurse pushed her bed through corridors that all looked the same until they reached a set of double doors with a sign that read, "Neonatal Intensive Care Unit." They had to scrub in first, washing their hands and arms with antibacterial soap, before they were allowed through the inner doors. The NICU was quieter than Lena expected. Rows of clear plastic isolates lined the walls, each containing a tiny baby hooked up to various monitors and tubes. The lights were dimmed and the only sounds were the soft beeps of machines and the occasional cry from one of the infants. "She's right over here," the nurse said gently, guiding Lena's bed to an isolette near the far wall. And there she was, Isla, Lena's daughter. She was so small, impossibly, heartbreakingly small. Her tiny body was covered in wires and tubes, monitors on her chest, an IV in her impossibly small hand, a feeding tube taped to her cheek. She wore nothing but a diaper and a knitted cap that was still too big for her head. Her skin had a faint pink tinge, and Lena could see her chest rising and falling with rapid, shallow breaths. But she was alive. She was here. And she was the most beautiful thing Lena had ever seen. "Can I touch her?" Lena whispered. "Of course." The NICU nurse, a young woman with warm brown eyes, opened the porthole on the side of the isolette. "You can't hold her yet, not until she's more stable. But you can absolutely touch her. Skin-to-skin contact is good for premature babies. It helps regulate their temperature and heart rate." Lena reached through the porthole with a trembling hand and gently, so gently, laid her palm on Isla's tiny chest. Her daughter was warm beneath her touch. Her heart beat a rapid flutter against Lena's palm. Isla stirred slightly, her miniature fingers curling and uncurling, and Lena felt her heart crack wide open. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I'm your mama. I'm right here. And you're doing so good, sweetheart. You're so strong." Isla's heart rate steadied on the monitor, the numbers stabilizing, as if she recognized her mother's voice. The NICU nurse smiled. "She knows you. That's a good sign." "How is she?" Lena asked, unable to look away from her daughter's face. "Really? Is she going to be okay?" "She's doing better than we expected for 30 weeks, the nurse said honestly. "Her lungs are more developed than usual for her gestational age, which is excellent. She's breathing on her own right now, though we're monitoring her closely in case she needs assistance. The next 48 hours are critical. We'll be watching for any signs of respiratory distress, infection, or bleeding in the brain. But right now, she's stable, and stable is very good." Lena stroked her thumb gently across Isla's chest, marveling at how fragile and fierce her daughter was all at once. "She's a fighter, like her father." "Speaking of her father," the nurse said carefully, "I heard he's in the ICU. Once you're both stable enough, we can arrange for him to come down here. I think he'll want to meet her." The thought of Roman seeing Isla for the first time made Lena's chest ache with a longing so intense it was almost physical. "He's been waiting for this moment since he found out I was pregnant. He's going to lose his mind when he sees her." "Then let's make sure both of you are strong enough to give him that moment," the nurse said with a smile. Lena stayed with Isla for as long as they would let her, her hand resting on her daughter's chest, whispering promises and love and everything she had been too afraid to say during the pregnancy. She told Isla about her father, about how much he already loved her, about how he had fought to stay alive so he could meet her. She told her about the safe house and the rain-soaked alley and all the ways their story had been broken and was now, maybe, starting to heal. Eventually, they made her return to her room to rest, promising she could come back in a few hours. Lena went reluctantly, her body exhausted but her mind racing. She needed to see Roman, needed to know with her own eyes that he was really alive, really going to survive. It was late evening by the time they finally cleared her to visit the ICU. A nurse wheeled her through more identical corridors until they reached the intensive care unit, where the atmosphere was noticeably more tense. Monitors beeped constantly, nurses moved with quiet efficiency, and the air felt heavy with the weight of lives hanging in the balance. They brought her to a room at the end of the hall, and Lena's breath caught when she saw him. Roman lay motionless in the hospital bed, his skin pale against the white sheets. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, and she could see more bandaging visible beneath the hospital gown covering his torso. An IV ran into his arm, and monitors tracked his heart rate and blood pressure with steady beeps. His eyes were closed, his breathing deep and even from whatever sedatives they had given him. He looked vulnerable in a way Lena had never seen before. Roman DeLuca, the man who commanded fear with a single look, who had built an empire on ruthless precision, looked almost fragile lying in that hospital bed. Lena wheeled herself as close as she could get and reached out to take his hand. His fingers were warm, his pulse steady beneath her touch, and she felt something break and rebuild simultaneously in her chest. "Hey," she whispered. "It's me. I'm here." Roman didn't respond, still deep in whatever drug-induced sleep they had put him in. But Lena kept talking anyway, needing him to hear her voice, even if he couldn't respond. "You did it," she said softly. "You survived. And so did I. And Isla. Roman, she's perfect. She's so tiny and fragile and hooked up to a million machines. But she's alive and she's fighting and she has your stubbornness written all over her." Lena's voice cracked. "I need you to wake up so you can meet her. I need you to see what we made together. Please, Roman, please wake up." His fingers twitched slightly in her grip, and Lena's heart leaped. "That's it. I'm right here. Come back to me." Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Roman's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, hazy with pain medication and exhaustion. But then his gaze found hers, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition and relief and love all tangled together. "Lena?" His voice was rough, barely more than a rasp. "You're okay." "I'm okay," she confirmed, squeezing his hand. "We both are. Isla and me. We're both okay." "Isla." Roman repeated their daughter's name like a prayer. "She's really here? She's in the NICU. She's early, and she's small, but she's breathing on her own, and she's strong." Lena brought his hand to her lips and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. "You're a father, Roman. We have a daughter." Something broke in Roman's expression, all that careful control shattering to reveal the man beneath. Tears slipped from the corners of his eyes, tracking down his temples, and his grip on Lena's hand tightened with what little strength he had. "I wanted to be there," he said, his voice cracking. "When she was born, I wanted to—" "I know, but you were busy getting shot and refusing to die." Lena tried to smile through her own tears. "The doctor said you fought like hell to stay alive, that you asked about us before they put you under." "Of course I did. You're my whole world." Roman's gaze searched her face desperately. "Are you really okay? The baby coming early? Were there complications? Did they—" "Emergency C-section." Isla's heart rate kept dropping during contractions. Lena watched his face go pale and hurried to reassure him. "But we're both fine. Healing. The next few days are going to be hard for all of us, but we made it, Roman. We survived." Roman closed his eyes, fresh tears escaping. "I need to see her, our daughter. I need to—" "You will. As soon as the doctors clear you to move, we'll get you down to the NICU. But right now you need to rest and heal." Lena stroked her thumb across his knuckles. "She's not going anywhere, and neither am I. We're both right here waiting for you." "Tell me about her," Roman said, his eyes opening to fix on Lena with desperate intensity. "What does she look like? Does she have your eyes? Your smile?" She's bald except for a little dark hair, and her eyes are still that newborn blue-gray that might change. But she has your nose. Lena smiled through her tears. And your stubborn chin. And when she cries, she gets this furious expression that's all you. Roman let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. How big is she? 3 pounds, 7 ounces, 15 inches long. Absolutely tiny. Lena's voice gentled. But perfect, Roman. She's perfect. They sat in silence for a moment, just holding hands and breathing together, until Roman's expression shifted into something darker. The ambush, he said quietly. What happened after Marcus got you out? I don't know. He said you took 3 bullets, but you were alive. That's all I know. David had 11 men with him when they made their move. Roman's voice had gone cold despite the pain medication. We killed 9. Marcus is hunting the other 2 as we speak. The faction is destroyed. Everyone who signed on to David's plan to remove me is dead. Lena should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual certainty with which Roman discussed ending lives. But instead, she just felt relief. So it's over? The threat is really over? It's over. Roman's gaze found hers. No one is coming after you or Isla ever again. I made sure of it. At the cost of 3 bullet wounds and nearly dying. Worth it. No hesitation. I would take 30 bullets if it meant keeping you safe. Don't, Lena said fiercely. Don't you dare talk about dying, Roman DeLuca. You promised me you would come back. You promised Isla, and we're holding you to that. Something soft and vulnerable flickered across Roman's face. I kept my promise. I came back. Barely. But I did. His fingers tightened on hers. And now I'm going to keep healing so I can hold our daughter. So I can be the father she deserves. So I can prove to you that I meant what I said about walking away from all of this. Lena went very still. You're serious about that? About leaving the organization? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Roman's voice was absolutely certain. The moment I'm strong enough to stand, I'm handing control over to Marcus and I'm done. No more empire. No more blood. Just you and Isla and whatever normal life we can build together. Roman, you can't just walk away from everything you've built. Watch me. His gaze burned into hers. I almost died today, Lena. I took 3 bullets and bled all over a warehouse floor, and the only thing that kept me conscious long enough for Marcus to get me here was the thought of meeting my daughter, of seeing you again, of having a chance at the life we should have had from the beginning. His voice dropped to something raw and pleading. I don't want this anymore. I don't want the power, or the fear, or the constant threat of violence. I just want my family. And if that means burning the empire to the ground and starting over, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. Lena stared at him. This man who had once seemed untouchable in his certainty and control, now laid bare by bullets and love and the realization that some things mattered more than power. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll figure it out together. Roman's expression cracked into something that might have been relief or gratitude or simply exhaustion. His eyes started to drift closed, the medication pulling him back under. Stay, he mumbled. Please. I'm not going anywhere, Lena promised. She settled into the wheelchair beside his bed, her hands still wrapped around his, and let the steady beep of his heart monitor lull her into her own exhausted peace. They had survived, all 3 of them. And tomorrow they would start figuring out what came next. 3 days after the shooting, the doctors finally cleared Roman to visit the NICU. Lena watched from her wheelchair as 2 nurses helped him into his own chair, his face going white with pain despite the medication as they maneuvered his bandaged body into position. His leg was immobilized, his shoulder strapped tight against his chest, and every movement looked like agony. But when the nurses asked if he needed to rest before making the trip downstairs, Roman's answer was immediate and absolute. No, I need to see my daughter, now. They made an odd procession through the hospital corridors, Lena and Roman in their wheelchairs, flanked by nurses and trailed by Marcus, who had barely left the building since the ambush. Lena had tried to send him home multiple times, but he had refused with the same stubborn loyalty that made him Roman's most trusted lieutenant. He almost died protecting my family, Marcus had said simply. The least I can do is make sure no one gets to him while he's recovering. Now Marcus walked a few steps behind them, his sharp eyes scanning every face they passed, every corner they turned. Old habits died hard, even with the threat supposedly eliminated. When they reached the NICU, Roman's hands were trembling on the armrests of his wheelchair. Lena reached over and covered one with her own, squeezing gently. "She's so small," Lena warned quietly. "And there are a lot of tubes and wires. It can be overwhelming the first time you see her." Roman's jaw tightened. "I don't care if she's covered in 100 tubes. She's my daughter. I just need to see her." The NICU nurse who had been working with Lena, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes and steady hands, met them at the entrance. "Mr. DeLuca? We've been expecting you. Your daughter has been asking about you." Roman's head snapped up. "She has," Sarah smiled. "She's been fussier than usual the past few days. We think she senses her mother's absence when Mrs. DeLuca isn't here. Babies know their parents, even this early. She'll settle down once she hears your voice." They wheeled Roman to Isla's isolette, and Lena watched his face as he saw his daughter for the first time. Every emotion she had felt that first day crashed across his expression in rapid succession. Shock at how tiny she was, fear at all the medical equipment, and then pure, overwhelming love that transformed his entire face. "That's her," he breathed. "That's our Isla." "That's her," Lena confirmed softly. Roman couldn't seem to look away. His gaze tracked over every inch of his daughter, the dark hair barely visible beneath her knitted cap, the miniature fingers that curled and flexed, the rapid rise and fall of her tiny chest. When Isla shifted slightly in her sleep, making a small sound of distress, Roman's hand shot out instinctively as if to comfort her before he remembered he couldn't reach her from the wheelchair. "Can I touch her?" His voice was rough with emotion. Sarah opened the porthole on the isolette. "Of course. Talk to her first. Let her get used to your voice." Roman wheeled himself as close as he could get, then reached through the opening with his good hand. His palm hovered over Isla's chest for a moment, trembling slightly, before he finally made contact. The moment his skin touched hers, something broke open in his expression. "Hi, baby girl," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm your dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. I had some things I needed to take care of first." He stroked his thumb gently across her chest. "But I'm here now, and I'm never leaving you. That's a promise." Isla stirred at the sound of his voice, her tiny face scrunching up in that furious expression Lena had described. Then her eyes opened, unfocused and hazy but open, and she seemed to look directly at Roman. Lena watched tears stream down her husband's face as he stared at his daughter. This man who had killed without hesitation, who had built an empire on fear and violence, who had survived 3 gunshot wounds through sheer force of will, he was completely undone by 3 pounds of fury wrapped in tubes and monitors. "She's perfect," Roman whispered. "Lena, she's absolutely perfect." "I know," Lena said softly, her own tears falling freely. "I know." They stayed like that for a long time, Roman with his hand on Isla's chest, Lena beside him, both of them transfixed by the tiny life they had created together. Sarah gave them privacy, stepping back to give the new family space, and even Marcus kept his distance, standing guard near the entrance but not intruding on the moment. Finally, when Roman's pain medication started wearing off and he was visibly struggling to stay upright, Sarah gently suggested they return to their rooms. Roman resisted at first, unwilling to leave Isla, but Lena squeezed his hand. "She's not going anywhere," Lena reminded him, "and you need to heal so you can come back stronger tomorrow. She needs you healthy, Roman." Reluctantly, he let them wheel him away. But he looked back at Isla's isolette 3 times before they turned the corner, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real unless he could see her. Back in Roman's ICU room, after the nurses had transferred him back to bed and adjusted his pain medication, Lena positioned her wheelchair beside him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both processing what had just happened. "I never understood," Roman said finally. "When people talked about what it felt like to become a parent, I thought I knew what love was. I loved you enough to give up everything. But this—" He trailed off, his gaze distant. "Seeing her for the first time, touching her, knowing that she exists because of us, it's like nothing I've ever felt before." "I know," Lena said. "It changes everything, doesn't it?" "Everything. Roman turned his head to look at her. I meant what I said, Lena, about walking away. I can't be the man who runs a criminal empire and be the father Isla deserves. Those two things can't exist in the same person. So what happens next? Lena asked. You hand control to Marcus and just walk away. Not just walk away, I dismantle it. Roman's voice was certain. I turn the legitimate businesses over to people who can run them legally. I burn the rest to the ground. And I make sure everyone understands that Roman DeLuca is out, permanently. People won't accept that easily. They'll see it as weakness. Let them. Roman's expression hardened. Anyone who tries to challenge me after I step down will learn very quickly why that's a mistake. I'm leaving the organization, Lena. I'm not becoming soft. Lena studied his face, the determined set of his jaw, the cold calculation in his eyes, even as he spoke about leaving violence behind. You're going to protect your exit the same way you protected your rise to power. Exactly. I'm going to make it clear that touching me or my family results in complete destruction. And then I'm going to disappear into a life where the most dangerous thing I do is change diapers. Despite everything, Lena felt a smile tug at her lips. You're going to be terrible at changing diapers. Then you'll have to teach me. Roman reached for her hand. Along with everything else I need to learn about being a normal father to a normal daughter, living a normal life. Nothing about our life is going to be normal, Roman. Not after everything that's happened. Maybe not, but it can be peaceful. It can be safe. His grip tightened on her hand. That's all I want anymore. Peace and safety for the three of us. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena watched Roman transform before her eyes. His physical recovery was slow and painful. The gunshot wounds healing with stubborn resistance. Physical therapy sessions leaving him exhausted and frustrated. But his emotional transformation was immediate and complete. Every day he wheeled himself down to the NICU to spend hours beside Isla's isolette, talking to her in soft tones about everything and nothing. He learned to change her tiny diapers through the porthole openings, to take her temperature, to recognize the different meanings behind her various cries. The NICU staff grew accustomed to seeing the infamous Roman DeLuca sitting vigil beside his daughter's bed, his reputation as a feared crime boss at odds with the gentle way he spoke to the fragile infant fighting for every breath. Isla, for her part, continued to prove she was indeed her father's daughter. She fought off every setback with stubborn determination, breathing complications, feeding difficulties, infection scares. Each time the monitors would alarm and nurses would rush to her isolette, Lena's heart would stop. But Isla always rallied, always came back fighting. She's stronger than she looks, Sarah told them after Isla successfully came off breathing support ahead of schedule. Premature babies born at 30 weeks usually need a lot more assistance. Your daughter seems determined to do things on her own timeline. She gets that from both of us, Roman said, his hand resting protectively on Isla's back as she slept. Stubborn runs in the family. Meanwhile, Roman made good on his promise to dismantle his empire. Marcus came to the hospital every evening with updates and decisions that needed to be made. Lena listened from her wheelchair as Roman methodically took apart everything he had spent years building. The shipping company goes to Anderson. He's been running it legitimately for years anyway. Just make sure the transition is clean and there's no trace of our previous involvement. The warehouses? Sell them, all of them. Put the money into the investment portfolio under Isla's name. And the territory agreements with the Eastern bosses? Roman's expression went cold. Any boss who is involved with David's faction gets nothing. Let them fight over the scraps. Everyone else gets to buy their territory outright. One payment, clean transfer, and then we're done. They're not going to like essentially being forced to purchase what they thought they already controlled. They're alive to complain about it. That's more than David and his people got. Roman's voice was flat. Make it clear that this is not a negotiation. They pay, they get clean territory with no interference from us, and everyone walks away. Or they refuse and they deal with the chaos of a power vacuum when I burn everything down on my way out. Marcus nodded, making notes. And the family holdings? The legitimate businesses your grandfather started? Those stay, but they get restructured into a trust for Isla with you and Lena as trustees. No ties to anything illegal, no connections to the old organization. Just clean business that she can inherit when she's old enough. You're really doing this, Marcus said quietly. You're really walking away. I already walked away the moment I saw my daughter for the first time, Roman corrected. Now I'm just making it official. Lena watched this dismantling process with mixed emotions. Part of her was relieved. This was the life she had wanted when she married Roman, before his world had turned too dangerous to survive. But another part of her worried about what would happen when Roman no longer had the structure of his empire to define him. Who would he become without the power and control that had shaped him for so long? She got her answer one evening when she found him in the NICU long after visiting hours. His wheelchair pulled close to Isla's isolette, his forehead pressed against the clear plastic as he whispered to his sleeping daughter. "I'm going to be better for you," he was saying, his voice barely audible. "I'm going to be the kind of father who shows up to school plays and teaches you to ride a bike and protects you from everything except the normal hurts of growing up. I'm going to love your mother the way she deserves to be loved, openly and without fear. And I'm never going to let you see the man I used to be. That part of me dies the day we leave this hospital. I promise you, Isla, I promise." Lena's heart cracked open at the raw honesty in his voice. She wheeled herself closer, and Roman looked up, startled to find her there. "How long have you been listening?" he asked. "Long enough." Lena reached through the porthole to stroke Isla's tiny hand. "You know she's going to find out eventually who you were, what you did. This city has a long memory. Then when she's old enough to ask, I'll tell her the truth." Roman's gaze was steady. "I'll tell her that her father was a violent man who did terrible things. But I'll also tell her that becoming her father made me want to be better, and that every good choice I make for the rest of my life is because she and her mother gave me a reason to change. That's a lot of pressure to put on a 3-pound baby. She can handle it. She's already handling things that would break most adults." Roman smiled slightly. "Besides, she has you as a mother. Between your strength and my stubbornness, she's going to be unstoppable." 3 weeks after Isla's birth, the doctors finally declared her stable enough to leave the NICU. She was up to 4 pounds, breathing entirely on her own, and taking bottles like a champion. The day they got the news that she could come home, Roman cried for the second time since Lena had known him. They brought Isla back to the safe house, the same place where this second chapter of their story had begun. But it felt different now. Roman had arranged for a nursery to be set up while they were in the hospital, complete with a crib and changing table and every baby item Lena had researched during those long, lonely months of hiding. The room was painted a soft sage green, with blackout curtains and a rocking chair positioned perfectly near the window. "When did you do all this?" Lena asked, standing in the doorway with Isla sleeping in her arms. "I had Marcus coordinate it while we were in the hospital." Roman came up behind her, moving slowly with his cane, his injuries still healing but no longer keeping him wheelchair-bound. "I wanted her to come home to something beautiful. It's perfect." Lena turned to face him, their daughter nestled between them. "Everything is perfect." Roman's hand came up to cup Isla's head, his large palm covering her entirely. "Not everything, not yet, but we're getting there." That night, after they had fumbled through their first diaper change at home and gotten Isla settled in her crib with a monitor that tracked her every breath, Roman pulled Lena aside. "I have something for you," he said quietly. He retrieved a small box from his pocket. Not a ring box, but something similar. When he opened it, Lena saw a key inside. "What's this?" "The deed to this house is in your name now, completely legally, no connection to any of my former businesses. If anything happens to me, it's yours, along with the trust fund for Isla and enough money that you never have to worry about anything again." Lena stared at the key. "Roman, I know what you're going to say, that I'm being paranoid, that the threat is over." Roman closed her fingers around the key. "But I need to know that you're protected, that if something goes wrong, you have options. You're not trapped with me because you have nowhere else to go." "I'm not trapped with you," Lena said firmly. "I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing this life with you." "Even knowing what I was? What I did?" "Especially knowing that. Because I also know what you're becoming." Lena set the key aside and took his face in both hands. "You're becoming the man I always believed you could be. The man who chooses love over power, who protects his family not through fear, but through devotion. That's who I'm choosing, Roman. Not the crime boss, not the empire. Just you." Roman kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promises neither of them needed to speak aloud. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me again," he said quietly. "Not because you have to, not because you're scared or pregnant or running from something, but because you want to build a life with me. A real life." "We're already married," Lena pointed out, though her heart was racing. "We were married the first time because I wanted to possess you. Because you were mine, and I wanted everyone to know it." Roman's hands framed her face. "This time, I'm asking you to choose me. To stand up in front of whatever friends we have left and whatever family still speaks to us, and choose me knowing exactly who I am and what I've done. Not as my possession, as my partner." Lena felt tears prick hot behind her eyes. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Roman's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I want to make vows to you that actually mean something. I want to promise you a future. Instead of just claiming ownership of the present, I want—" "Yes," Lena interrupted. "Yes, I'll marry you again." The smile that broke across Roman's face was like sunrise, warm and genuine and completely unguarded. He kissed her again, deeper this time, pulling her close as if he could merge them into one person. From the nursery, Isla made a small sound, not quite crying, but definitely protesting her parents' absence. They broke apart laughing, and Roman went to check on their daughter while Lena leaned against the doorframe and watched him lift Isla carefully from her crib, murmuring soft reassurances about bad dreams and daddy being right here. This was her family now. This fierce, broken, healing collection of people who had survived the worst and chosen each other anyway. They got married 3 months later in the garden behind the safe house. It was a small ceremony, just Marcus and a handful of Roman's former lieutenants who had remained loyal through the transition, plus Sarah from the NICU and a few other nurses who had helped save Isla's life. Lena wore a simple white dress that skimmed her post-pregnancy body, and Roman wore a dark suit with Isla strapped to his chest in a baby carrier that made him look simultaneously dangerous and domestic. The minister, a retired priest who had known Roman's grandfather and asked no questions about the past, kept the ceremony short and meaningful. When it came time for vows, Roman handed Isla to Marcus and took both of Lena's hands in his. "I've said a lot of things in my life that I didn't mean," Roman began, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "I've made promises I had no intention of keeping. I've lied to protect myself and hurt people to maintain power. But standing here with you, I'm making promises I intend to spend the rest of my life keeping. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's hard. I promise to be the kind of father our daughter deserves. I promise to build a life with you that's defined by love instead of fear. And I promise that the man I was before is gone. What's left is just a man who loves you more than anything in this world and wants to be worthy of that love." Lena had prepared her own vows, had written them carefully in a journal over the past weeks. But standing here looking at Roman, at the scars he bore from protecting their family, at the tenderness in his eyes when he glanced at Isla, at the absolute certainty in his expression, all those prepared words disappeared. "I ran from you because I was afraid," she said instead, her voice steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. "I spent 6 months believing that love wasn't enough to survive in your world, and maybe it wasn't, not the way things were. But you changed your world. You burned down an empire because you loved us more than power. And that kind of love, the kind that chooses sacrifice over control, that transforms violence into devotion, that's more than enough. That's everything. So I promise to never run again. I promise to trust you even when I'm scared. And I promise to build this new life with you, whatever that looks like." The priest pronounced them married, and Roman kissed her like a man who had finally found his way home after being lost for years. Isla, still in Marcus's arms, chose that moment to let out an indignant cry that made everyone laugh. "I think someone wants her parents back," Marcus said dryly, handing the baby over to Lena. The reception was simple. Food catered from a local restaurant, champagne for toasts, and music playing softly from speakers set up around the garden. Lena watched Roman move through the small crowd with Isla in his arms, introducing his daughter to the few people who remained from his old life. The fierce loyalty on Marcus's face when he held Isla. The genuine warmth from the nurses who had become unexpected friends during those long weeks in the NICU. The quiet respect from Roman's former lieutenants who had chosen to follow him into this new, legitimate life. This was their family now. Small but fierce. Broken but healing. built on truth instead of lies. That night, after the guests had left and Isla was asleep in her crib, Roman found Lena standing on the back porch watching the stars. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "How different everything is from a year ago." Lena leaned into his embrace. "How I thought I knew what my life would look like, and how completely wrong I was." Good wrong or bad wrong? Good wrong, terrifying wrong, the kind of wrong that turns into exactly right when you stop fighting it. She turned in his arms to face him. "Are you happy, Roman? Really happy?" He considered the question seriously. "I thought I was happy when I had power, when people feared me and my empire was untouchable. But that wasn't happiness, it was satisfaction. The feeling of achieving what I set out to achieve." His hands settled on her hips. "This, you and Isla, and this quiet life we're building, this is happiness. The real kind that doesn't require blood or violence or fear to maintain, just love and presence and choosing each other every single day. Even when Isla keeps us up all night crying?" "Especially then," Roman smiled. "Because even exhausted and covered in spit-up, this is a better life than any throne I ever sat on." 6 months later, Lena stood in the nursery watching Roman read to Isla from a picture book about animals. Their daughter, now 8 months old and thriving beyond all medical predictions, sat in her father's lap, her chubby hands reaching for the colorful pictures as Roman used different voices for each creature. The house had changed over the past months. What had started as a safe house had transformed into a real home. Photographs covered the walls. Isla's first smile, her first time holding her own bottle, a family portrait taken in the garden. The kitchen bore evidence of Roman's ongoing attempts to become a better cook. The living room had been taken over by baby toys and blankets, and all the beautiful chaos of a family actually living instead of just surviving. Roman had been true to his word. The empire was gone, dismantled so thoroughly that younger criminals in the city didn't even remember the name DeLuca as anything more than a cautionary tale about the cost of power. The legitimate businesses had been restructured and were thriving under new management. Roman himself had become something entirely different, a father who knew the words to every children's song on Isla's playlist, who could change a diaper with one hand while holding a phone conference with his investment managers with the other, who fell asleep most nights with his daughter on his chest and his wife in his arms. "You're staring," Roman said without looking up from the book. "I'm appreciating," Lena corrected, moving into the room. "There's a difference." He glanced up at her then, and the warmth in his eyes made her chest ache. "Come here." Lena settled on the floor beside them, and Isla immediately reached for her, making the grabbing motions that meant she wanted to be held. Roman transferred their daughter to Lena's arms with the practiced ease of months of shared parenting. "She's getting big," Roman observed, running a finger down Isla's chubby cheek. "The doctor said she's completely caught up developmentally. You'd never know she was premature." Lena kissed Isla's dark hair. "Our miracle baby. Our fighter." Roman's expression grew serious. "Marcus called this morning. The last of the property transfers went through. It's official. There's nothing left of the organization except the legitimate businesses in Isla's trust." "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved. Free." Roman met her gaze. "Ready to figure out what comes next." "What does come next?" "I've been thinking about that." Roman shifted to face them more fully. "The trust fund is going to give Isla more money than she'll ever need. But I want to do something with the resources we have. Something that actually helps people instead of hurting them." "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation. For families affected by violence, women who need to escape dangerous situations, kids who grew up in the life like I did and want out, people who need a second chance." Roman's voice was earnest. "I spent my whole life being the reason people needed help. Maybe I can spend the rest of it being the solution instead." Lena felt tears prick behind her eyes. "Roman, that's incredible." "It's the least I can do. And it gives me a purpose that doesn't involve hurting anyone." He reached out to stroke Isla's head. "I want her to grow up knowing her father did something good with his life. That he didn't just walk away from violence, he actively worked to prevent it." "Oh, she's going to be so proud of you," Lena whispered. "I hope so. But more than that, I hope she grows up safe and loved and completely unaware of how close she came to not existing at all." Roman's gaze found Lena's. I hope she never has to know what it's like to run from someone who's supposed to protect you, or to lie to someone you love because you're afraid they can't keep you safe. She won't, Lena said firmly, because she has parents who chose to break the cycle, who chose love and healing over power and violence. That's the legacy she's going to inherit. Isla made a happy gurgling sound and reached up to grab Lena's hair, tugging with surprising strength. Roman laughed and gently extracted the strands from their daughter's grip. She's definitely got my stubbornness, he said. And my survival instinct, Lena added. Poor thing doesn't stand a chance of being anything but impossible. Good. Roman's expression was fierce and proud. Let her be impossible. Let her be stubborn and strong and absolutely unwilling to settle for anything less than she deserves. Let her be everything we fought to become. They sat together on the nursery floor as the evening light faded to dusk, their daughter between them, and Lena felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Real, lasting peace that didn't come from the absence of threat, but from the presence of genuine safety. This was what she had run for, what she had lied for, what she had survived for. Not just to escape danger, but to find this moment, this perfect, ordinary moment of being a family. Roman reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together while Isla played with the buttons on Lena's shirt. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For running, for lying, for doing whatever it took to keep Isla safe. His voice was rough with emotion. For giving me a reason to become someone better. For choosing me again when you had every reason not to. For building this life with me. You did the work, Roman. You're the one who chose to change. I chose to change because you gave me something worth changing for. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You and Isla are my whole world. Everything I am now. Everything I'm going to become. It's all because you believed I could be more than what I was. Lena squeezed his hand, too full of emotion to speak. Isla yawned hugely, her tiny face scrunching up in that expression that meant she was getting tired. Roman stood and reached down to lift their daughter from Lena's arms. Come on, baby girl. Time for bed. Lena watched him carry Isla to her crib, watched the tender way he laid her down and tucked the blanket around her small body, watched him stand there for a long moment, just staring at his daughter, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. This was the man she had married, not the crime boss, not the emperor of a violent world, just Roman, a father completely transformed by love, choosing every day to be better than he was the day before. As they stood together in the darkened nursery, listening to their daughter's soft breathing, Lena realized that their story had never really been about running or hiding or surviving violence. It had been about transformation, about two people who loved each other enough to destroy everything they had been and rebuild themselves into something new. The lie she had told 6 months ago, the terrible, necessary lie that she had ended their pregnancy, had saved Isla's life. But the truth they had chosen to live afterward had saved all of them. Roman turned from the crib and pulled Lena into his arms, holding her close in the peaceful darkness. I love you, he whispered against her hair. Both of you. More than I knew it was possible to love anything. I love you too, Lena replied, her arms tight around him. And I'm not running anymore. I'm exactly where I want to be. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had been broken and scattered and lost, now found and whole, and finally, impossibly, home. Outside, the city they had both fled continued its relentless pulse. Deals being made, violence brewing, power shifting hands like it always had and always would. But inside this house, in this quiet room where their daughter slept safe and loved, none of that mattered anymore. Here, in the life they had built from ashes and lies and fierce, uncompromising love, they were finally free. And that freedom, that hard-won, blood-bought, desperately protected freedom, was worth everything they had sacrificed to achieve it.